Hello and welcome to a brand new Arseblog Arsecast right here on arseblog.com. How are you? Hope you're well. Hope all is good with you and yours. Thank you for being here as always. It's been a pretty busy week in terms of football because we've had the European Championships on all week and that's been kind of fun, but from an Arsenal perspective, still relatively quiet. However, it does seem like some wheels are beginning to turn in terms of certain transfers and targets that we're being linked with on a fairly consistent basis. So we're going to get straight into the discussion today rather than me just waffle on at the start. And I promise you, it's got absolutely nothing to do with the sun being out here in Dublin and me wanting to go and sit in the garden with a book and a cold drink. I promise. I mean, perish the thought that I would shirk my responsibilities as a podcaster to give you 2 or 3 minutes of idle waffle. But look, sometimes you just need to get the show started. So that's exactly what I'm going to do. And my guest today to talk about the European Championships and to go into a bit of detail on some of the transfer targets that we've been linked with, including Ben White, James Maddison, Albert Lokonga and more. Lewis Ambrose. Hello, Lewis.
Hi, Andrew. How are you doing?
I'm all right. I should point out that we are recording this before the games on Thursday. So if something extraordinary happens today in the European Championships, it's not going to be part of this conversation. So just to let people know, we're not ignoring it, whatever it is or might be or might not be, but just to put that caveat in place there. So what are you expecting from today?
I thought you were gonna ask me about how I enjoyed the thrilling Netherlands match tonight, and then see how ridiculously wrong I get it in the morning, and everybody could laugh when it goes out in the morning.
What did you make of Ukraine, North Macedonia, by the way?
Oh, I couldn't believe Moranchuk pulled that off. Didn't see that coming.
Doesn't he play for Russia?
Was that not the name of the Ukrainian centre forward?
No, was that not the guy who scored yesterday for
you're right.
Russia?
that was obviously on my mind. He did score Russia's goal yesterday.
Yeah. Anyway, look, I'm asking you to see into the future, which, you know, as talented as you are.
Well, I don't think he's suddenly going to play for a different team today than he did yesterday. So.
The transfer market is not quite that crazy this summer, that's for sure. So, look, how have you been enjoying it so far as a feast of football and all that kind of stuff? Personally, I've been quite enjoying just watching football without having to work or think about, the result of the game too much or be too concerned about the results of the games. It's been pretty fun, I think, for me, even if I think some of the games haven't been quite as high quality as we'd have liked.
Yeah, but I think sometimes high quality football is less entertaining when you're sitting there as you are and as I am as well, and I'm a neutral really. These games are happening, and I like a player or I like the way that one of the teams is playing, so I sort of root for them as the game goes on. But I don't really have a horse in this race. So I've really been enjoying it. Yeah, as I say, I think sometimes the higher quality football, you watch Manchester City, Liverpool or something, and it can be a little bit stale and cancelling each other out. It's nice to have the soundtrack of fans to these games.
Yes.
Quite a few fans in some stadiums and some fans in every stadium, so that's definitely been enjoyable. And I think it's been quite entertaining. I don't think there's been many games so far, maybe all 3 of the games today are going to be terrible after I've said this, but I don't think there's been any games so far that were really, really poor. Even if the quality is a little bit lower, I think they've been quite entertaining. So I'm definitely enjoying it. Yeah.
What about the lack of Arsenal players? Has that been a factor in, or has that sort of crossed your mind? Because sometimes you can look at a game and again, you might have no skin in the particular teams that are playing, but because there's some Arsenal interest in one side or the other, you want to see those players doing well. It does feel a bit strange that Granit Xhaka, we've seen Aaron Ramsdale, of course, an ex-Arsenal player, did really well for Wales. Kieran Tierney hasn't played for Scotland and may not play against England on Friday night because of injury. And then Bukayo Saka, Bernd Leno, they're probably not going to get a great deal of game time during this tournament. So it is a bit weird, isn't it? Because we're used to, or have been used to down the years, of international tournaments being absolutely jam-packed with Arsenal players.
Yeah, we all remember, I think, sort of sitting in front of the TV because you knew Vieira and Henry were going to be playing, or Fabregas or Van Persie were going to be playing, and not just Arsenal players, but Arsenal players that really had the ability to be the star of the tournament as well, and go on and win the whole thing and be a crucial player in that success. And we saw that with Vieira a couple of times. We saw it with Cesc Fabregas in 2008 and 2010. That is a shame, definitely. On the one hand, after the season we just had, I don't want to see any of them. I don't want to watch them again. But on the other hand, I was delighted. I really enjoyed Aaron Ramsey's performance and his goal for Wales against Turkey. I thought he was brilliant. And
vintage, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. It really was, and you knew it was even the little bit of wastefulness brings back some memories, but you knew that if he kept going, and that he does keep going, that he'd probably get another one and eventually put one away. And obviously as an Arsenal fan, you sit there watching that game and you're delighted that Aaron Ramsey's the hero and Gareth Bale isn't when Wales win.
Well, I mean, to be fair to Bale, he did produce two pretty lovely assists.
Yeah, he did. He was brilliant until he had to have an attempt from the penalty spot. Yeah, I mean, there was a little bit of, even though I was rooting for Wales and rooting for Ramsey, there was a bit of enjoyment that Bale managed to sky his penalty and they still got the result at the same time. I think that was quite nice. Yeah. So, yeah, best of both worlds. I do definitely miss watching, not only Arsenal players, but really world-class players that play for us go and do it for their countries, and you can root for them. I don't know if you've missed that, or if you're happy to not be looking at Arsenal players for a month.
It's a little from column A, a little from column B. I think we've said this before, that the lack of Arsenal players at the tournament speaks to perhaps the state of the squad to a certain extent, and the quality levels in the squad. And some of the players are young, who next time the Euros come around will definitely be involved, but it does speak to the quality of the squad a bit, and how we need to improve, etc., etc. But at the same time, I would like to have a little bit more Arsenal interest, even if, like you and like everyone else, I'm sort of sick to the back teeth of them. If we had good players, A, we might not have finished 8th, and B, those players might be tearing it up a bit at the Euros right now. Like it was quite funny. I think I was watching Italy-Switzerland on Wednesday night, and everyone was saying, "Oh, Xhaka's having a nightmare of a game, having a terrible game," and I was like, "He's not really. He's just having a very Granit Xhaka game with lots of passes." He doesn't have the agility, the mobility to do what, let's say, Locatelli did. And that first goal, I think, is my favourite goal so far in the tournament. He can't do that. We know that. And by comparison, of course, he pales in comparison to that kind of midfield play. And this is why, for all the talk of we need to get X amount of money for Granit Xhaka, and I think we do have to try and maximise the value, I'm ready to sell him. I'm ready to move on. I'm ready for a post-Xhaka Arsenal. And, that's not putting all the problems we've had on him or anything like that. I'm just ready for that. I'm ready for something new, etc., etc. But I didn't think he was terrible. He was just his normal self. And that, as much as anything, kind of sums up why I think, as a club, we need to say, right, it's time for something a little bit different. It was quite funny. I was watching a stream with Martin Tyler and Alan Smith doing the commentary. And Martin Tyler said to Alan Smith something along the lines of, well, Roma are interested, some talk about him going there. Well, what do you make of that situation, Alan? And there was a little bit of a pause, and he said, basically, really diplomatically, well, I think there comes a time when it's good for both player and club to go in a different direction, or to make a change or something like that. And I was thinking he was obviously making sure he didn't stick any knives in anywhere, but I think he was dead right.
Yeah, I think so too. And I think it makes sense. And I agree with you as well. I don't think Xhaka was awful against Italy. I think this is also a bit of the product of a player playing for a team that's much weaker than the opposition. I thought that a couple of times during this tournament. I've been here in Germany, and I saw a lot of people really criticising Germany after the game against France. And I think there's no doubt that France were the better side, but it just felt to me a lot more about France being really good than Germany being really, really bad or dreadful. So yeah, and that's what it is with these tournaments as well. I mean, players that we aren't used to seeing, and then people making quite snap judgments on teams or players, I think on one or two games only. So it's all to be taken obviously with a pinch of salt, but that's no fun. The other thing, when you mentioned Locatelli there and the lack of Arsenal involvement, I did think when he scored those 2 goals last night, if we're tired of Arsenal players, it would at least be nice if we'd have already signed somebody that is involved. I just remembered Tomasz Rosicky scoring his couple of goals in the Czech Republic's opener in 2006 after we'd signed him. But before, obviously, any of us had seen him play for Arsenal. And I think that's always quite nice during the tournaments, but it obviously doesn't happen that often that Arsenal have their business wrapped up nice and early in the summer.
No, I mean, particularly this summer where there's a lot going on and everything else. And look, maybe when a player does what Rosicky did in those games in the World Cup, he sets the bar very high. The expectation level that he arrives with then is really high because of the goals that he scored.
And the other side of that coin, let's hope that none of the players that we're going to sign do anything spectacular, because it will push an extra 10, 15 million on whatever the clubs are going to demand when we're going for them.
I mean, we'll come to that. We'll come to some of those players, but I don't think too many of them are at the Euros anyway. So I think we're lucky enough in that regard. I mean, on Locatelli, I thought it was quite funny to see people going, "Oh my God, we're never going to be able to afford him now." And I was thinking, but like, that's, in terms of transfer rumours, while he fits a profile, and while you could say, yes, I could see Locatelli in red and white and I would very much like it, it never seemed like a realistic option, because we don't really sign Italian players. When you look at our Italian player list down the years, who have we got? Viviano, who never played.
Arturo
Lupoli, Vito Mannone, and that's it, I think, in terms of senior players. Of course, there was a young defender called Nicolo Galli who tragically lost his life at a young age, and he was a very highly rated central defender. But in terms of A, Italian players coming to Arsenal, and B, Italian players in general coming to the Premier League, particularly in their peak years, it really doesn't happen.
I think it's very rare, really, isn't it, for Italian players to leave Italy at all?
Yeah.
And you've got, the top players. You've got so many huge clubs in Italy, and it feels like all of them end up at Juventus or Inter or Milan when they're doing a little better than they've done the last few years. So I think Locatelli has been linked with a couple of those as well. Now that he's sort of broken into the Italy lineup as well this tournament with Verratti injured, I think it's sort of nailed on, really. I'd be very surprised if he ended up not at Juventus. It just any Italian does really well, and like, it would be really weird if they don't just go and play for Juventus now. Yeah,
I think that's probably his most likely destination. They're going to have to pay a few quid extra for him. And he was at AC Milan and was let go to, where is it, Sassuolo? Yeah. Under the watch of Ivan Gazidis, Mr. Supreme Talent Spotter himself. So well done to you, Ivan. Has anyone else at the tournament caught your eye so far in terms of individuals or teams or, things that have perhaps surprised you or not?
I really enjoyed, and I was surprised, and really, I think everybody enjoyed that Netherlands-Ukraine match. I just really enjoyed watching the opening game of the tournament. You expect for the two teams, and you expect it to be so cagey. And it was just like both of them, just like a revolving door. It's like a basketball game. No midfield, just, the Netherlands attacking, then they'd lose the ball and Ukraine would run all the way up the pitch, and there was no one trying to stop it at all. I found that very, very entertaining in a very weird kind of way, because I think you don't see many top level games nowadays that look like that. I think the Netherlands, I don't think they're fantastic, but I think they've got a few really, really nice players. Memphis Depay is obviously one of them. Frankie de Jong, he's going to join him at Barcelona this summer, apparently. Frankie de Jong, it's just a midfielder that I could just watch all day. The way he plays, there's just an elegance and a calmness about everything he does, which I think is fantastic. And I've never seen, as an Englishman who doesn't really care too much about the national team, I was really taken aback. I've never seen England, that opening 20 minutes against Croatia, play with any kind of intensity like that. Certainly not at a tournament. So. I think that was quite interesting, and Gareth Southgate obviously got a lot of criticism for his team selection, but I think that just goes to show how many top English players there are nowadays. It's quite ridiculous.
Yeah, I suppose, and also the outrage at team selection is not simply an Arsenal phenomenon. I think it is. It's a thing now. Like, I could understand why people are going, well, you've got left backs, why are you playing Trippier there, etc., but ultimately, those decisions hinge on whether or not you win a game. Like, think about the North London derby when Aubameyang was dropped. It was more of an afterthought because we won the game. Had we not won the game, that decision is much more open to question. Had England not beaten Croatia, that decision would have been much more open to question, even if it wouldn't necessarily have been that particular thing that was, the downfall. So, yeah, it's so far so good in terms of the tournament then.
Yeah, I'm enjoying it, and as I say, not having a horse in the race, I think sometimes you sort of do wish that it really meant something, but for the most part, it's nice to just sit down and watch a few games of football, and if something happens, my day's not really ruined.
Yes.
No matter what happens.
What was the reaction like in Germany to Germany's defeat to France? I mean, look, France, I think, are the favourites. They've got so much talent in their team. Mbappe's pace is frightening to watch. The way he ran away from Mats Hummels that time was just was ridiculous. So I mean, to lose to France is not necessarily anything to be ashamed of. But were there concerns about the lack of precision in the final third is what I'm going to say. Not, there plenty of possession, but it was what they did with that possession. It reminded me a bit of Arsenal, which is not good from a German point of view. You get into the final third and then hopeful cross and see what happens. It was a bit too Arsenal.
Yeah, it's funny what tournaments do to people, I think. Germany obviously had a horrible 2018 World Cup, and they've had a horrible 3 years really since then. The most recent international break, they lost to North Macedonia in World Cup qualifying. They, I think have won that Nations League. Now there's been 8 Nations League games, and I think they won 1. They've played France, the Netherlands, Spain and Ukraine each twice in the 2 editions of that. And they've only won 1 of those 8 matches. So there wasn't, coming into the tournament, much hope that Germany, and it's weird to go into a tournament like that, I think, to not think that Germany are one of the favourites.
Yeah. And
then it feels like over the last week or 2 that hope has slowly built up.
It's the hope that kills you,
It is. And then I thought I watched the game at a public viewing. I don't know how many people there. Lots of very excited Germans. A few very, very excited French people who made sure that everybody knew who they were supporting, which was lovely to see. That mix, and up singing Les Marseillais at the full-time whistle and stuff like that was great.
Yeah.
So it was like a really nice atmosphere. It's the first time I've been in an atmosphere with football fans for a year and a half. So it was great. I think Germany, like you say, there was a big disappointment about not creating chances. I think there's not been enough recognition that it was France that they were playing against, and they're the world champions, and they've got all of these, Benzema and Mbappe and Pogba played brilliantly, and pretty much a world-class player in every single position. And Germany are a team kind of trying to find their way still. Müller and Hummels have been called back in after 2 years of forced exile from the national team. And I think France deserved to win, but I don't think Germany were horrible, and I think there's to be honest, been a bit of an overreaction to the losing 1-0 to the world champions in the first group game is far from disastrous.
True. Well, look, loads more football to come over the coming days and the weekend, but we better move this discussion on to Arsenal. And look, nothing concrete has happened yet, but there are things beginning to churn away in the background and names that are coming up and links with certain players that appear to be more and more concrete as the days pass. So I thought we'd go through some of these and just get your thoughts on the players that we've been linked with. I think the one we should start with is the most interesting one because it sparks all kinds of discussions, is Ben White, the Brighton defender. I mean, central defence, I think, is an area we need to improve, and most people kind of had an idea of how we might do it, and that included, the £28 million signing we made a couple of years ago, and it doesn't look at this point as if that's going to be the case. It might be, though. I mean, this is the thing. We're still so early in the summer, it's hard to know, but there's a lot of talk about what might happen with Saliba and what the arrival of Ben White might mean for that. But I think in terms of this discussion, what do you make of targeting somebody like Ben White to come in, at a pretty substantial price? It's not the world record stuff, but it would be close to our club transfer record, and certainly the highest fee we'll have ever paid for a defender. If it goes through, he'll usurp the record from Mr. S. Mustafi. So there's something for him to be proud of. But Ben White, what do you make of him as a player, and what do you make of Arsenal's interest in him?
It's a low bar if he just has to be better than Mustafi.
Well, he's just more expensive. More expensive. I'm not saying he's going to be better.
Oh, so you don't even think he'd be better?
No, that's not what I'm saying. Don't quote me on that. All the Arsenal aggregators, AFC stuff, do not put Arseblog says Ben White is worse than Mustafi. That's not what I'm saying. I promise.
That's what it sounded like to me.
No. I promise.
I think he's really good. Firstly, just to get that out of the way, I think there'll be other discussions about Ben White that aren't about Ben White, the footballer. So I do think he's a good player. I think he's a good defender. I think he's very good with the ball, and something that we've talked about, losing David Luiz, and it says everything that we missed David Luiz when he wasn't available last season. To have defenders who are good on the ball is very important nowadays. It just is. All 11 players, including the goalkeeper, they all have to be very good at moving the ball forward. Otherwise it becomes, and we've seen it with some of our players, we saw it, I think especially with Socrates, it becomes so easy for the other team to kind of mark players and just guide the ball towards the weak link in possession, who then sort of doesn't really know what to do because they can't play a pass and find somebody 30 yards upfield. So I think it's very important that we have players who can play out from the back, and I think it will help us offensively. What I struggle with this one is the cost. It's obviously, we don't know how much we'll spend this summer, but it's an enormous amount of money to me, and we don't need, and as I say, I do think he can help us offensively as well, but we don't need to get better in defence really. We had the third best record for goals conceded last season, and we only scored the 9th most goals in the Premier League. So it's pretty obvious to me which end of the pitch is more urgent, and then it's simple numbers as well. As you said, there is Saliba, there's Holding, there's Gabriel and Marie, there are even on the books still Mavropanos, and Callum Chambers can play centre back too. If you play a back three, Kieran Tierney's played centre back, and if he plays at the tournament this summer, that's where he'll play for Scotland. So centre back isn't screaming out as the position where we need maybe quality but not numbers, and it's an enormous amount of money when we do need numbers in other areas of the pitch. Sort of,
sure,
a centre back this summer you could take or leave as a concept, but you have to sign at least one midfielder, and you have to sign at least one attacking midfielder, and probably a right back or a left back, at least one of them. And a goalkeeper too. There's a hell of a lot to do. I think Ben White as well. I would just say that I think Brighton were quite entertaining to watch last season. He's very comfortable on the ball, and that's great to know that already, that a player would come in and have that in his locker. But also very occasionally played right back for Brighton last season, and did play in midfield 6 or 7 times as well. So. maybe that's something to take into account if you sign him and he's a centre back. But you know that if you need him in midfield, you put Rob Holding or whatever back in the team and push White a bit further forward to cover for Thomas Partey if he's injured or something like that. So maybe we should take that into account as well, that he can play in a couple of other positions. Yeah,
I do think it's interesting, when you say we don't need to improve the defence. I mean, I think we can both improve the defence and improve our creativity. I don't think we should just say we've got to do one thing, and if an opportunity or if they see somebody who they feel can improve our defence, then go for it. What I would say is that, like, if it was a case that we had £70 million to spend this summer, and that's just an arbitrary number, and we were spending £50 million on Ben White, you could very, very obviously say, well, that doesn't leave us with much room to do everything else that we're going to do. But when you look at some of the names that we're being linked with in that attacking midfield role, like we can write off Martin Odegaard probably because of what's going on at Real Madrid, but he would have been an expensive player if we were able to sign him, if Real Madrid were willing to do a deal. There's another name we're going to talk about now, James Maddison, £60 million being touted for him. It doesn't feel like the pursuit of Ben White is coming at the expense of other business. Now, of course, it'll all come out in the wash and we'll wait and see what we spend, but it doesn't seem like all of our financial eggs are going into one basket. I think it's a really interesting one in the sense that he is 23. £50 million seems like a lot, but if he's at the club for whatever it might be, 6-7 years, something like that, then that transfer fee, starts to look good value. I've done a little bit of scouting on him. He's very comfortable on the ball. He carries the ball well. He's good with both feet. His range of passing, long passing, appears to be really good. So, if we are looking for somebody who is capable of being a distributor from deep in the way that David Luiz was, in the way that people said, this is the kind of player we need, then I'm okay with this. And I think maybe some of the concern or some of the objection to doing a deal for Ben White is because we are, as a fan base, and have been invested in the idea of William Saliba since we paid all that money for him, and I get it. I'm sort of looking at it thinking, wow, when you spend £28 million on an 18-year-old, it is exciting because it says something to you about the quality, or if not the quality, the potential of that player. And right now we're in kind of limbo. We don't know what's going to happen with him. It doesn't appear to be a particularly promising sign that we're going to bring in someone like Ben White. But I wonder if you were to take away, the Saliba side of this. Imagine if we didn't have him and we were looking at next season with, all due respect to him, going into the season with Rob Holding as our number one right-sided centre-back. Do you think people would look at it a little bit differently?
Definitely. I think I would look at it differently too. I definitely have I wouldn't say much of an investment in Saliba. It's what Saliba means for the rest of the club, I think, in a broader way. Is this a club that's going to identify and give chances to young players? Are we a club that, and the people who did that deal are gone now anyway.
Yeah, well, that might be part of why.
Yeah.
It's not happening, No, well, that's my only theory, is that there has to be something about the deal which, as a club, if, and I know it's still a big if we're willing to sell Saliba this summer, it can only, in my opinion, it can only be because there is something about the deal that we want to distance ourselves from. Like, I don't believe it is the quality of the player. I can't believe it's simply a case that Mikel Arteta just doesn't like his face. I don't, I know there's been some issues with other players, but I think those were behavioural problems. Saliba hasn't been around long enough for there to be that kind of issue, So it can only be because there is something in the deal that doesn't add up and we want to move away from, wipe the slate clean, if you like.
Yeah, but I think it's understandable. And I definitely feel that myself. This sort of feeling that we have a really good young centre back there, probably, and a player that we spent a lot of money on, and and that we're going to move on from that without him ever playing for us, seems insane. It feels insane. So I definitely think that would change this completely if Rob Holding was the first choice centre back and that was that. I don't think anybody really would have a problem with Ben White coming in. To me, it's sort of, but maybe we've already got the solution. So, and maybe we haven't, but you'd like to see it at least tried. And then you think, so are we spending, apparently a £40 million bid, and that was turned down, so 50 million. Are we spending that on something that we already have? And I think that's the big question, and that's why Saliba completely changes the context of how we probably talk about Ben White. Yeah,
well, look, it does look as if the club's pursuit of him is
and it's not
serious.
His fault either.
No.
If he comes in, then I'm sure people will sort of, be happy to see him and support him and see how he gets on, and not sort of be against him just because he isn't William Saliba.
Yeah, I would hope so. I mean, look, he's a young English player who could be at the club for many years if he goes well. So, look,
we'll get Mikel Arteta after his debut in a press conference saying, "I'm sorry, Ben White didn't cost £3 million," as a little homage to Arsene Wenger.
I'd love to see it. James Maddison. Given that the Odegaard situation looks like it's nixed because of Real Madrid's desire to keep him, and also, of course, Emi Buendia going somewhere else altogether. I mean, this is another interesting one for me, because there's part of me that goes, for what it would take to buy James Maddison, we could probably buy a similar-ish player from the continent who would then arrive and leave us with enough money perhaps to buy that right back and also that goalkeeper. And then there's another part of me that goes, well, who cares if they're going to invest in the team and we want them to invest in the team and they invest in the team? Do we not get a little bit like I understand and I see the perspective, and it's something I'm concerned a little bit about, in the sense that, I don't think Cronkies are gifting us money to go and spend. I think what we spend this summer has to be offset with departures as much as possible. I think what we spend this summer will come in the form of debt that we have to service. So, the idea that you could just go big without it having some kind of fiscal consequences is ridiculous. At the same time, though, here's a 24-year-old who has done it at Premier League level, who, has got his best years ahead of him and could easily add plenty to a team which does not create enough chances. There was a stat doing the rounds. Do I have it here? I think I opened it up somewhere. It comes from Harvey Downs, who works for Opta, and he says James Maddison has created 230 chances in the Premier League since making his debut in 2018-19, 148 more than any player for Arsenal. That player happens to be Mesut Ozil with 82, while only Kevin De Bruyne has created more in the division during this period. So, are we just kind of trying to find things to not like about any deal we do?
Yeah, I think there's maybe an element of that. But I do think you've got a point as well when you say, well, could we not go and sign somebody similar from, maybe for less money? Or I would even maybe then take the discussion in another direction and say, couldn't we sign somebody similar but maybe even a step above for a little bit more money? How much is... I think personally he's probably a better player and would fit in with us, with our needs more. How much more will Jack Grealish cost this summer compared to James Maddison? Is a question that I find myself asking. Although obviously we know that the club didn't strongly, or maybe not quite as strongly as we thought originally, pursue Emi Buendia. Well, for the 30 million is Maddison going to give you that much extra compared to what Buendia might give you? So
yeah.
Yeah, I think it is a really valid conversation to have and a valid point to make. Obviously, yeah, at the same time, he has done well for Leicester the last few seasons. He's added a few more goals last season to his game, and I remember that everyone talked about that interview where he talked about wanting to get in the box more and working on that. Maybe shoots a little bit too often for my liking, 25, 30 yards out, and it's maybe not the best choice, but he'll have a go. But if there's something Arsenal lack, it's probably something like that. And Martin Odegaard did a little bit of that when he came into the side, and it was a little bit refreshing, as long as it wasn't Thomas Partey shooting from God knows where. So I see why the links would be there. I think playing under Brendan Rodgers as well, we do always assume that Mikel Arteta doesn't have the players that he wants to have to play the football that he wants to play, and he's pretty much said that himself. Maddison's played as a number 10 behind a striker at Leicester. He's also played deeper in a midfield 3 as a sort of attacking midfielder. So, and I think it frees up. We probably, in those sort of forward positions, the left is maybe where there's someone missing as well, but signing a Maddison maybe frees up Smith Rowe to play from the left week in, week out instead of just occasionally. So I don't think that's a huge issue. It is interesting. The link doesn't seem to be going away. If you'd have told me a couple of weeks ago that Arsenal would go and spend 70 million or so on one player this summer with no European football, is it 5 years now without the Champions League, my jaw would have hit the ground. I think no financial fair play rules have been relaxed a little bit. It would still really surprise me. I think if we went and spent that much, or maybe not that much, but however much it would take to get Maddison out of Leicester with 3 years left on his contract, I see no reason for Leicester to want to do business with us. They had interest in Harry Maguire a couple of years ago from Man United and made him the most expensive centre-back in the world. They're not going to do us any favours. It's going to take an enormous bid, probably more than we spent on Pepe, to get Maddison out of Leicester. And that would just, it would really surprise me, as I say, to see us go and spend that much on one player this summer, and a player that, as good as I do think James Maddison isn't in the England squad. He's got a 26-man squad for the Euros, and he didn't make the 26-man squad because, and Mason Mount and Jadon Sancho and Jack Grealish are all excellent players as well. But that's the sort of, if we were spending 70, 80 million, having spent that much on Pepe and not quite got the return that we wanted, I would hope that we were spending that amount of money on a player that walks in and is the best player at the club immediately.
Yeah, I'm not sure that would necessarily be the case with Maddison, but at the same time, I think he would bring qualities to that part of our game which are missing, the creative qualities, the chance creation. I don't know how much of our issue was down to... I know we didn't take many shots or enough shots, but how much was that down to not creating the chances, etc., etc. So you could see how he could make a difference. And again, if this is an investment in a kind of long-term solution to some of our problems, the money you spend now obviously looks a lot, but if he's a guy who's going to be here for a number of years, around whom you're going to build whatever kind of core of the team for the next number of years, then maybe this is part of what appears to be something like a joined up strategy. When I look at the players that we're linked with, for example, Ben White is 23, Ruben Neves has gone very quiet with him, but he was 24, Maddison is 24, Lokonga is 21, I think. There's a goalkeeper, Aaron Ramsdale, who's only 23. So there is, if we're trying to find some kind of a pattern as to the targets that we're being linked with, these are guys who aren't necessarily fledgling in terms of their careers, but are about to sort of hit their prime years, if you know what I mean. They're mid to late 20s, where they're going to be in their prime. They're going to be at their best. Is that not exactly what we as fans have been saying as a club we need to do if we're going to rebuild, if we're genuinely going to rebuild and create a new kind of team? Is this not how you should do it?
Yeah, I think that's a really fair point. We look, and I'm sure it's something that we've talked about before, that if, last summer or during the season, if you look at the Arsenal squad, how many of those players do you look at and think, yeah, in 4 years he'll still be at Arsenal, or he'll still be playing regularly for Arsenal? And both Ben White and James Maddison would be. As you said about Ben White as well, that fee doesn't look so much once he's played 6 or 7 years for the club. When you break it down, we've spent how much on Thomas Partey, and we talked about his age so much. People talked about his age so much last summer, and it's 50 odd million, and then you've got a player in the team maybe for 4 years until he's at an age where he can't play 30 games a season anymore. And that 50 million over 4 years is over 10 million a year. You look at 12, 13 million a year. Obviously, if you spend 50 million on Ben White and then he's in the team for 8 years, it's a lot less. So I do think that's, as I say, a really good point. I think it's definitely worth taking into consideration. I remember sort of the big example of this was when Man City bought Raheem Sterling, and I think it was about 50 million at the time. And people were sort of like, oh, but he's hardly done anything. And it's, well, yeah, but he's 21 years old, so he's going to be a Man City player for 10 years, and you've paid 5 million for each year.
Yeah.
It's an amazing deal when you look at it like that. We do definitely have to get younger, and we do have to build a team. And as I say, I'm sure it's something we've touched on before. We have to build a team where you can look at that team and say, like, in 3 years, how much of this 11 will be the Arsenal 11? And last season, especially the start of last season, when Saka wasn't in the team all the time, Smith Rowe wasn't in the team, you looked at the Arsenal 11 and you had sort of Kieran Tierney, and that was basically it. That you would look, maybe Bernd Leno, maybe Thomas Partey, who would be sort of by then the oldest player on the pitch. That's how limited it was. And now we are talking about, obviously, Gabriel, and if you had a sort of a back four, and three of them are Gabriel, Tierney and Ben White, and you've got Maddison and Smith Rowe and Saka, then that's more than half your team is built for the next 4 or 5 seasons.
Martinelli,
obviously would be Martinelli and maybe Balogun, if he really can come and prove himself this season as well. Then obviously, that makes a massive difference. And suddenly you're looking at Arsenal not as a team that every summer, it feels like the last 3 or 4 summers, it's been, it's a big summer for Arsenal, it's the biggest in the club's history. It's a rebuild. It would be really nice to go into next summer and go back to the old. Oh well, we just need 2 players.
Yeah, exactly.
We never get them, but we only need 2 of them. So
yeah, I mean, I think that there's the thing. If you're going to rebuild, then all you want to do is like some mild landscaping after that. You know what I mean? Rebuild your house, and then it's not like every year you've got to put an extension on the back of it. You just want to be doing incremental things for as long as possible. I suppose the counterpoint to what I just said there is that with that kind of strategy in mind of buying players in around 22, 23, 24, etc., one of the things people might say is that, well, if you're going to do that, are you better off in some ways of looking for players who aren't quite as established as James Maddison? So you're not spending £70 million on the 24-year-old. You're spending £20 million on the 24-year-old. He doesn't come from the Premier League. He's coming from France, or he's coming from Germany, or he's coming from somewhere, I'm always sort of slightly staggered and jealous at the way German clubs can successfully unearth the kind of players that we all want to buy within like 18 months of them appearing for a German club. You know what I mean? That kind of thing where you say, okay, do that, make that your strategy, but also if you are a club that is financially challenged, make it as cost effective as possible.
It's that there's the fine line though, isn't there? We sign Pepe, and then it does maybe take a year to acclimatise, and you've overpaid for what you've actually got in the end. there's obviously a massive skill to finding those players. That's why the one that excites me the most that we've not talked about is the links to Lokonga.
Yeah, well, he's next on the list, so let's go for it.
Yeah, but I think you're trying to find this balance between building a team that can be your team in 3 years, but without sacrificing points now. And it was a big thing, when so many of the kids were playing, but they're early 20s or teenagers. Martinelli, Saka, Smith Rowe, all around 19, 20, 21. And it was this feeling that they will have bad games and they might cost you points. Even if we didn't feel like that as fans, Mikel Arteta clearly felt like that. And generally speaking, and I don't think those three players really count towards that, but generally speaking, if you're playing players that age, you are maybe sacrificing a mistake here or there for what the development is and what you get out of it in 2 or 3 years because they've played regular football. The thing is, if you're signing a 23-year-old centre-back in Ben White and a 24-year-old midfielder in James Maddison, I guess you'd say, both Premier League proven players as well, if you want that. You're signing guys that will be better in 2 years, but can also already deliver and have already gone through that education process and they're ready to come in and play every single week.
What do you make of the links to Lokonga? I mean, everyone has got their eyes on Bissouma. If we are going to overpay is the wrong word. If we are going to pay a premium for someone like Maddison, does that then give you scope to, I won't say take a gamble on someone like Lokonga, but a younger player who, again, you're buying for what he will become and what he's going to develop into and everything else? You can sort of take that risk a little bit with a midfield player. I mean, do you feel like Thomas Partey, is he ready to sort of be the leader in midfield, to sort of take this young 21-year-old under his wing, et cetera, or, would Lokonga be one piece of the midfield puzzle?
Yeah, I think especially if Granit Xhaka's sold, then I'd be surprised if we went and signed Lokonga and then he's expected to play 35 times next season. But I think it's exactly the sort of deal that we need to be pursuing. I mean, you talk about, we see players playing in Germany and they get 1 year in a German club and they suddenly is worth 20 or 30 million and we all want to sign whoever it is. It happens so often, and that's the key. For me, where Arsenal, all well and good if we can spend on Ben White, we can spend on James Maddison. Everybody knows both of them. Ben White's been he was linked with Liverpool last summer already. It's not a surprise to anyone. He's in the England squad. Maddison we've all seen for 2 or 3 years at Leicester now. The players that people haven't seen, the players that, Lokonga, I think 20 million euros is the quoted price that Anderlecht want from what I've read anyway. Yeah. I think it's just the sort of, you look at the Guendouzi deal. Guendouzi's come in pretty cheap a couple of years ago. He's had a couple of miserable years, really. After playing a lot in the first season, he's had 2 miserable years. And got 1 year left on his contract now with an option, according to James, an option for Arsenal to trigger for another year. But we're not going to lose money on him. And these are the players, you bring in Willian, and obviously he didn't cost a fee, but you do lose money. And we brought in Socrates at that age, and sort of about 30 years old, and we did lose money because no one takes the 32, 33-year-old off your hands. If we signed Lokonga and he doesn't develop into what we want, then you probably still get 15 or 20 or 25 million for him, because in 2 years, in 3 years, he's still only a 23-year-old midfielder who maybe just had a bad year and hasn't had the chance at Arsenal that he wanted, and things haven't quite worked out. In terms of character and leadership and being under Thomas Partey's wing, he just captained Anderlecht for the whole second half of last season. So
there you go.
I think, from that, you see at that age that's a character that maybe, like a Kieran Tierney, doesn't need to be, not the best way to put it, but mollycoddled and
Sure.
eased in, and you don't need someone there taking care of him and holding his hand. To be 21 years old, captain in any football club, definitely one of the biggest clubs in any country in Europe, where the expectation, and people say it's just the Belgium league, but you play for Anderlecht, the expectation is to win every single week. So that's enough pressure as it is to have that on his shoulders as captain for half a season at that age. And he looks, from the bits I've seen, and there are always people on Twitter nowadays, I guess that's me with the Bundesliga, but there are people that watch everyone, and Lokonga seems to be very highly rated in Belgium and by anybody who's seen much of him. And this is the exact sort of signing I want to see Arsenal make. And it's the exact sort of signing that when a Dortmund or a Leverkusen or whatever would sign Lokonga, then people sort of go, oh, wait a second, a year later, we'd really love to sign him. And then he cost 50 million.
But that's exactly what I was talking about earlier on.
Yeah,
it's
exactly. I mean, we've been linked this summer with Edmund Tapsoba at Leverkusen, who's been there for, he moved from a mid-table Portuguese club and has been there for 18 months. And now they're talking about, if we want to sign him, there's no release clause, it costs 50 million. This is the big step for me where Arsenal can make progress, is signing those players before that move. They make that move not to a Man City, not to a Real Madrid. There are hundreds of players out there, and they make that move up a step to sort of prove they can play at the top level, but not for one of the top clubs. And then that's when we have to sign them, when they're making that move, and not because by the time that they're playing for Leverkusen every week or Wolfsburg or whoever, well, Man City and Liverpool have seen them and they're interested in them, and our standards right now are a bit lower than theirs. They need players that can come in and play in the Champions League, and we don't. We can afford to have that little bit of education. And ultimately, what's the worst case scenario? I think, like you see with Guendouzi, the worst case scenario is we get our money back. Yeah,
I think you're right. And I think, if we're talking about how a deal for him might be financed, it isn't. It doesn't work exactly like this. But if you get close to 20 million euros for Granit Xhaka and you spend close to 20 million euros on this guy, it's a sort of net negative or a net neutral cost to replace one guy with one guy in midfield,
And you've swapped a guy almost entering his 30s for a guy who just entered his 20s.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't think you can do an entire summer of transfer business quite like that. I do think I agree with you completely that these are the kind of players that we should be profiling and bringing in more because of like you said, they're low risk generally because, they're going to maintain some level of value even if things don't go particularly well. But I don't think you can do like an entire summer of transfer business like this. I think it's difficult to do it like that, and you do need perhaps some established talent. So that's an interesting one. And from what various people are saying, it seems to be perhaps the closest one to being completed at this moment in time. Quite how close it is, I can't say. And as ever with transfers, stuff that can be close one day can be very different the next. But maybe we keep fingers crossed on that one and see what he can bring in. I didn't know that about him being the captain of Anderlecht for the second half of the season as well. So that suggests a level of personality that could be very useful in our team, particularly.
At least wouldn't be overawed by the challenge of coming to a bigger league and a bigger club.
No, I think he's probably at a point in his career where that's what he wants. So, he's ready for that step. Final one we'll talk about is a bit of a strange one, I think. We know that Arsenal need a goalkeeper this summer. And we know that perhaps one of the things they need to do is find, because of the various restrictions, is a homegrown goalkeeper. Or a goalkeeper that won't take up one of the non-homegrown spaces. A curious name, I suppose, is Aaron Ramsdale. He didn't really have a great time at Sheffield United last season, but nobody at Sheffield United had a great time. I think he ended up their player of the season, which is, I don't know, maybe says a lot about how busy he was. He's in the England squad. He was called up to replace... Thingy. I can't remember the guy's name.
Dean Henderson.
Dean Henderson, that's his name. Sounds like an EastEnders actor rather than a goalkeeper, but there you go. Anyway, he's in the England squad. What do you make of this one? Because this is one where I do think I probably can't talk myself into the price, because the prices being quoted for him are substantial, and I'm not sure the quality of the player or the potential of the player really adds up to spending that amount of money for what you assume is going to be a backup goalkeeper to Bernd Leno next season. I know we maintain interest in Andre Onana, but he's not going to be able to play until November anyway. So it's an expensive one, isn't it, for a player who's been less than convincing for some time?
I really don't understand this. I thought he was poor at Bournemouth, and I was really surprised when Sheffield United decided to spend a lot of money on him last summer, and I thought that them spending a lot of money on him was partly tied in with some nostalgia and a little bit of, a home crowd kind of thing. He grew up there and was in the academy, and they let him go, and I think that was all tied up in them signing him. As I say, I was really surprised, and then I don't think he was very good for Sheffield United either. Player of the season, but goalkeepers in relegated teams, I mean, how many do you see where people think they've had a good season and they've just been really, really busy? I've never been particularly impressed with him. I'm also not... If we're going to sign... I mean, who knows, maybe we won't sign. But we're targeting Ben White, and we're linked with James Maddison, and we've got Smith Rowe and Saka and Chambers and Rob Holding. And I know we've been talking a lot about the homegrown players, but that's a lot of homegrown players. I think Martinelli in a year or two will qualify as one as well. Balogun's obviously signed his new contract. It's not... And, we're not even in Europe this season, so the homegrown thing... and having a bigger squad, and that means you need more homegrown players to fill it up. It's not desperately urgent. So needing a second choice, I think it's very useful if your second choice goalkeeper is homegrown, but I don't think it's a necessity. And if they were to spend 20 million on a goalkeeper who's not ever going to be the first choice goalkeeper, I would really have to question that decision making. Yeah.
I mean, I get why we need a number 2 goalkeeper, because what we have at the moment, definitely. Isn't sufficient. And I know the goalkeeping situation and everything else at Arsenal is a bit weird, in the sense that, it doesn't look like Bernd Leno is going to sign a new deal. So that, coupled with the interest in Onana, who can't really play until November and who's been basically out for a year, even when he is eligible to play again, is going to need some time to sort of train and get himself back up to speed, etc., etc. I don't know. Yeah, I can't quite figure it out myself. Like, if we're going to go from Leno to Onana for next season, get Onana on a free, great. You can see how that's a deal we need to do, but surely there could be a short-term loan solution, an experienced backup goalkeeper we could bring in to understudy Leno, even if we do a deal for Onana now. What I mean?
And if we're spending 20 million on a goalkeeper, we can't find a better goalkeeper. Like, if that's the budget for a goalkeeper, there's not a better one out there than that. That would, like I say, that would really surprise me. I understand the desire to have a homegrown backup keeper. I don't think it's quite the necessity that it's being made out to be. Liverpool don't have one. Chelsea don't have one. Man City have 2 non-homegrown goalkeepers and then a third choice who's homegrown. I think it's a nice bonus to have in your backup goalkeeper. I don't think you have to do it, and to then pay the premium and spend 20 million. That would, as I say, it would confuse me, and I'd really have questions about that. Leno, whether or not Leno is there with a new contract, I think I'd be surprised if Leno's not there this season. And then, obviously, as you say, there are the links to Onana. And then there are other goalkeepers out there. There's always goalkeepers out there. Matt Ryan is I think, a pretty good goalkeeper who wouldn't cost very much, I imagine, with 1 year left on his Brighton contract. Dortmund have signed a new goalkeeper and they're selling their old first-choice goalkeeper this summer. Roman Burki is, not a goalkeeper that's going to come in and be Arsenal number one for 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 years, but I would say no worse really than Bernd Leno, and available he's been linked with Monaco for €3 million. I think there are always teams that are signing goalkeepers, and when they're doing that, they need to get rid of the first choice. It's not even not a position you can rotate, or the backup is ever used very often. So there's always someone selling a goalkeeper for not very much. To go and spend 20 million on the guy who is going to be second choice would really, be strange, I think. It would be
a weird allocation of resources, beyond the weirdness that we're already seeing when it comes to £50 million.
Well, we're going to spend 250 million, so it's nothing.
Maybe they've got some idea that there's a big amount of money coming in for somebody else. I don't know. That's just me speculating. Where's the money coming from? I mean, how much are you going to sell?
Aston Villa preparing a £27 million bid for Emil Smith-Rowe.
Stop it.
How insulting was that?
Look, I really don't have any issue with it. I genuinely don't. I think Villa were maybe chancing their arm a little bit. But I think it's probably it should be a wake-up call, to be honest, to the people running this football club. Because I really think that we've spent so long looking up at where we need to be. We've stopped looking around to see where we are and to see what some of the teams around us are doing. And that's kind of what we have to compete with. We've got to get back to where we want to get back to, in the top 4, in the Champions League and everything else. But it's not simply a case anymore of, well, you've got to be better than Liverpool, Chelsea, Man City, United, other teams that are going to be in that top 4, top 6 area. You've got to look around you at some of the other teams. And I think what Villa are trying to do should be something we take note of. You know what I mean? Like Smith-Rowe's...
Yeah, I think I think the thing I'd say about the bid and the way they're doing their business is it shows, or it screams ambition. And Leicester have obviously been like that for a couple of years now, and it wouldn't surprise me if Everton were similar, although they've obviously had a bit of a setback losing their manager. There is something very ambitious about it, and I think you're right, we look up and we look at where we were and where we want to be and the teams that are occupying those places. But I think if we were Leicester and Aston Villa fans and West Ham have just had a good... I think we'd be looking at Arsenal and Tottenham and saying, well, we can sort of overtake them. There's no reason we can't finish above them again and again and again.
Let me throw something back at you though. If Villa bidding for Smith-Rowe is ambitious, is Arsenal bidding for James Maddison not also ambitious? You know what I mean?
I know I think. I mean, if we were to bid 70 million for James Maddison, I think it's a different thing. And it sounds really arrogant, right, to say that we're still bigger than Leicester and Aston Villa are tiny compared to us. And I guess fans of those clubs wouldn't agree or wouldn't appreciate it if we said that. But I don't know. I think there's something different. I think there's a draw. I think Leicester can finish above us for as many years as they like, within reason, and there would still be a draw for a lot of their players. You get linked with Arsenal, and you saw it with Liverpool when they were maybe having a few bad years. They could still attract big players and bigger names, maybe than they deserved at the time. And I think that history and that wealth of success down the years, it does mean something still, I'd say the potential of Arsenal is still so much bigger and greater than the potential of Leicester, and I really hope that's not true. I don't think it's true of Aston Villa, but who knows, because nobody 15 years ago would have said that Man City had any chance of winning titles and being in Champions League finals.
Look, the other thing to take away from it is that Smith-Rowe's got 2 years left on his contract. We're we've had such a poor season that, when I say a club like Villa, I don't mean it in any disrespectful way at all. I just mean another sort of upper mid-table club feels emboldened to come along and make a bid for one of our brightest talents, one of the jewels in the academy crown. And that is something that should make the owners, the executives, the manager, everybody sit up and take notice. Like, I'm not sure, they're not blind to where we are. They're not blind to the weight of public opinion about where we are and everything like that. But stuff like this does say something about your own stature, or, how diminished you might appear to be to other clubs. Like, I don't blame Villa for bidding 25 million for a 20-year-old who's only made 22 Premier League appearances. I don't really have any issue with that. Arsenal have rejected the bid, and that's fine. Why not chance your arm? You never fucking know in football. I don't think football clubs make bids for players just to troll the opposition fans or to troll an entire football club. It doesn't work like that, you know?
Only apparently when they add a pound on the
Yeah, exactly. They haven't even done the pound thing, so they're not taking the piss. But, 2 years left on Smith Rowe's contract. I don't think it's a coincidence that this week we've heard about interest in him from Aston Villa, reportedly from Real Madrid. I'm not sure how accurate that is, but, he's in negotiations, or there are contract talks going on. I mean, this really should be a pretty fucking simple thing to sort out, shouldn't it? A 20-year-old who's grown up at the club, he's got 2 years left on his deal. We want him to stay. We want to make a team in which he is going to be an integral part. He's made a huge contribution. I get that the agent is going to want to get the best deal possible for his client, and these things go around the houses a little bit. But, like, if we can't get this done, it should take like an hour to sit down with Smith Rowe and his agent and get this sorted.
That's probably my biggest concern with this story. Or concern is maybe a bit much, but the biggest question that I have is just, how hard can it be to convince Emil Smith Rowe and give him, and find agreeable terms? And obviously, if the agent is demanding something completely insane, then it's going to hold things up a bit. But he's proven himself for half a season, and it's only half a season, but he's proven how important he can be and is to the club. He's also, for that half a season, maybe shaken off any doubt for long-term fitness. And he's been at the club for, I don't even know how many years he's been at the club. He's grown up there. You do have to wonder, like, how hard can it be, seriously, to get this one done? And as you say, you sit down and an hour later he should be walking out the room with a 15-year contract signed.
Just the 15
years. Was it 8 years that Fabregas signed back then? Yeah, 5, 6 years, whatever it is. It shouldn't be hard to get this one done. And there's obviously a lot going on this summer, but maybe that bid from Villa gives them a bit of a kick up the backside to sort that out quickly now as well.
Fingers crossed. Just one more thing that they have to sort out in this long, hot summer that lies ahead. But look, great to talk to you about all those things, Lewis. Enjoy the Euros, and we'll catch up soon.
Thank you, Andrew. Bye.
Thank you very much indeed to Lewis. You can find him on Twitter at LG Ambrose, And since we recorded that, there was a very entertaining game between Ukraine and North Macedonia, which ended Ukraine 2, North Macedonia 1. But it was good fun all the same. Right, that's just about it, because, look, it is off-season. There's not much to chat about. We've done all the chat in the podcast itself. If you want something a little bit extra, you can find a new episode of the podcast Statements for our Patreon members. That is where I have a guest, and they have to either strongly agree, disagree, or strongly disagree with statements that I put to them, suggested by our listeners. You can find that right now at patreon.com/Arseblog. My guest is Ryan Hunn, who is the co-host of the Stadio podcast, and we talk about things like Arsenal DNA, giving contracts to players over 30, William Saliba, and lots more. Patreon.com/Arseblog. Right, James and I will be here, I think, on Monday. I'm not quite sure what's going on. There might be some upheaval is not quite the right word, but the Arsecast extra schedule might be a little bit higgledy-piggledy, I think is the right way of putting it, for a few weeks. But I will give you more information as and when I have that. But we will have an Arsecast extra for you Monday, Sunday, soon, very soon. Don't worry about it. In the meantime, have yourselves a great weekend. Enjoy the football, and we will talk to you on the next one. Until then, take it easy. Cheers. Bye-bye. Spend some fucking money. Spend some fucking money. Spend some fucking money. Not quite that much money. Not on him anyway. Spend a little bit less money. Make your money go further. Think about the economies of scale. Spend as much money as you think is reasonable given the financial circumstances the club finds itself in this post-COVID world. Spend exactly the amount of money that I think a player is worth and not a penny more. Spend much less money on him and much more on the other player I like better. Spend whatever it takes to get a deal done as long as it's a good deal, but don't spend too much on agents' fees. 3 months later. What a waste of money! What a waste of money! What a waste of money!